Hello, Red Wings, and welcome to today's advisory lesson. Today, for our advisory lesson, we are going to be talking about a topic that many of you may already be aware of, but we thought it was a good time in the school year to either remind you, if you are familiar with mandated reporting, or teach you a little bit about it in a creative way if you are not. In the state of Wisconsin, April is Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month. It is a time when educators and community institutions across the state invest time, energy, and efforts into a concerted effort to educate the public about child abuse and neglect and steps that can be taken to make sure all of our children in the state of Wisconsin are safe. And safety is always the number one most important thing we strive to achieve for all of our students here at South High. So let's talk a little bit about mandated reporting. What is mandated reporting? State law in all states across these United States require that anyone employed in service to children, and children is defined as ages 0 to 18, to report suspected child abuse and neglect to their local child protection agency once they become aware of it. Now, this statute says that anyone employed in service to children has to report, and that's very true. I think a lot of times young people think it's really just their teachers or their school counselors that have to report suspected child abuse and neglect. It's actually everybody employed by this building and employed in any agency in town that works with children. So we're talking our custodians, our coaches who coach your sports teams, advisors for our clubs, workers at the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, the referees at your sporting events, really any kind of employment that involves working with kids also involves being required to report suspected child abuse and neglect. Now, why do we do this? And why are there actual laws in all the states that make sure we do this? Well, first and foremost, it's about safety. No one, I repeat, no one, especially a child, should ever feel like their safety is endangered in the care of people who are supposed to be loving, supporting, and protecting them. And that includes your time here in the building. We want all of our students here at South High to always feel safe. And that's the number one reason that these laws exist, and the number one reason why your teachers are always going to be reporting suspected child abuse and neglect. What is the other reason? Well, it isn't necessarily a reason, it's just a fact. If someone who is employed in service to children finds out about abuse or neglect and does not report it, they will face legal consequences. Those legal consequences are twofold. First of all, there is an incredibly high fine that goes with not reporting. If your failure to report results in injury to a child, there can also be criminal charges against you if you do not report. In addition, you will lose your license to be employed in service to children in the state of Wisconsin. So, for example, as the school social worker here, if I would not report suspected child and abuse neglect that I become aware of, I would lose my license to be a social worker. So those are kind of the two main reasons that we do this important kind of work. To further help you guys understand what mandated reporting might look like in a school environment, we're going to do something a little bit different today in teaching out our advisory lesson. But before we do that, I want you to know that the story that's going to be told as part of today's advisory lesson might be a little bit too close to home for some of you. We know we have students right here at South High who do experience abuse and neglect in their home environment. And sometimes hearing a story can be a trauma trigger and can cause past memories to come back, tweak anxiety, be a trigger for some depression, in any way, shape, or form, we want you to know that if seeing this content and hearing this story today does put you in a place where you feel you are vulnerable and need support, your teachers and your support team here in the Counseling Center are absolutely available to you. And with that, let's hear a story. Hey everybody. So, like many of you, my life hasn't always been easy. Back when I was in high school, things were pretty messed up at home. My dad died when I was young, and my mom didn't have the best luck in her relationships after that. It seemed like there were always different men in and out of our house. Some were pretty nice, but some, let's just say she could have done better, like much better. Of those men, let's just call him Isaac. Well, he drank a lot. And when he drank, he got angry. And when he got angry, I knew it was going to be a long night that would most likely end in him and my mom fighting. And my mom getting the shh kicked out of her. Friggin' hated that man. But her life, her choice, whatever. I just kept to myself and locked the bedroom door on the nights he was drunk. Problem solved. But one night, the arguing got so bad that I was really afraid for my mom. There was the typical yelling and screaming, but then there was some big thuds, and then it was suddenly quiet, like hair standing up on your arms kind of quiet. It didn't feel right. So I unlocked the door and snuck downstairs. Isaac was sitting on the couch, downing his Coors like it was the last drop on earth. Like in the bottom of that bottle of beer, he could find salvation. I asked him where my mom was, and he said, "She's gone," and looked at me with this evil, piercing stare. I said, "Well, what do you mean she's gone? Gone where?" And he said, "She took off, all right? You stupid daughter of a whore," and started tearing into me like you would not believe. And then, out of nowhere, he gets up, runs up to me, and smacks me across the face with the back of his hand. It happened so damn fast. The whole world got shiny bright, and then, I kid you not, I saw stars. I remember thinking, wow, you really do see stars when someone smacks you that hard. Well, I came back around. I think I was out for a little bit. And thankfully, my amygdala kicked in. That's the part of your brain where the fight, flight, or freeze instinct lives. Thank God that I have an amygdala, because I hightailed it back to my bedroom and I locked the door. I looked in the mirror and saw the welt already forming around my eye and on my cheekbone. I didn't want to risk going down to the kitchen, so I opened up the window and grabbed a pile of snow. I shoved that snow and ice into a t-shirt and put it on my eye, and then I waited. I waited what seemed like forever for that douche canoe to come upstairs, but he didn't. I fell asleep, and I slept good, too good, which was weird now that I think of it. The next morning was a school day. When I woke up, Isaac's artwork was already forming on my cheek. I put on more makeup than any teenager needed to put on, trying to cover that bruise that was blossoming in all its beautiful colors. I did a damn good job, too. Fortunately, I was always good at makeup. Anyway, when I was done, I thought I had it covered up and was good to go for school. I went downstairs, and my mom was in the kitchen. I don't think she slept, like, at all. She looked like hell. And when she saw my cheek, she started to cry. She sobbed like a 2-month-old. The next 10 minutes were pretty emotional. To keep it short, my mom apologized like 10,000 times and assured me on my father's grave that Isaac was out and I would never see him again. I forgave her because, well, it's complicated. She's my mom, right? Anyway, off to school I went. My first hour class was social studies with Mr. Calvin. Mr. Calvin was one of those teachers that all the students liked. He was super chill, didn't assign a lot of useless homework, and liked to talk with us about Star Wars and his kids. Kind of cheesy, but in a really sweet way, you know. Anywho, after class, he asked me to stay and chat a bit. I knew I was doing okay in the class, so I didn't really know why he wanted to talk. So it ends up he saw right through all of my makeup and knew something had happened. What did I do? Well, I told him, like everything. Not sure why. I guess I just needed someone to hear me. And I needed someone to validate the crap that I was going through. And he did. He was so kind and just listened. He reminded me that no one had a right to harm me. He reminded me that I deserved at all times and in all places in my life to feel safe and to feel protected. He reminded me that he genuinely cared, and that because he was a mandated reporter, he would have to report my abuse to Child Protective Services. That's when I freaked. I did not want a social worker sticking their nose into my family's private business. My mom was literally going to have a cow. But Mr. Calvin promised me that neither my mom nor I were in any trouble, and the social worker's only job was to support us. He also said he wasn't even sure if they would get involved, and that wasn't his decision, but that he had to report it because, well, number one, my safety was the most important thing to him, and he needed to be sure I was never going to get hit again. And number two, the law said he had to make the report. In fact, he would lose his teaching license if he didn't make the report. So what was I supposed to do? I didn't want one of my favorite teachers to lose his license. Besides, he was right. I was damn sure I was never going to put myself in a situation where I was going to get hit again. And my mom needed help. She'd been through so much since my dad died. So that same day, a social worker came and met with me. It was a surprisingly good experience. You hear all the bullcrap stories about social workers taking kids away from their parents and throwing parents in jail, but Mr. Calvin was right. All she wanted to do was make sure my mom and I were safe. She also met with my mom alone and got her into some counseling with the local domestic safety agency in town. You know, now that I think of it, it was just a few months after that my mom met James. He's a good guy, and he's still in her life 5 years later. Long story short, life got better after that. Mr. Calvin did what he had to do, but it was the right thing to do, and it really did help. Teachers have a tough job, and they choose that job because they care. No, really, they do. Part of that caring means that sometimes they have to make tough calls, like being mandated reporters of abuse and neglect.